Hello. Today I'm going to look at chapter 10. Um, Chapters 10 through 15 deal with heroes and heroines. And the Greeks have an interesting view of heroes and of heroines, which is sort of different from what our view would be. Our view is closer to what the Romans would do with heroes, because for us, heroes represent people who would sacrifice themselves for the good of the group, right? That's sort of the Spock in the Wrath of Khan, right? The good of the many outweighs the good of the few or the one, right? So that sort of sentiment. Ancient Greek heroes are not necessarily that type of hero. So, first of all, are they a blessing or a curse? In a sense, they're both. Heroes represent the best that humans can be as far as ability. Some of the heroes are demigods. One of the parents is divine, which of course gives them an edge. Some are not. For instance, Hector, the Trojan hero in the Iliad, is entirely mortal. But they still are better than any of their peers. They are exceptional. And that's a good thing because that exception can actually lift the community. But that exceptionalism also has to be sort of honored. And if it's not, what ends up happening is the hero gets angry, and then you have this behemoth who is out to get you. Think maybe of, my super ex-girlfriend, that type of thing. When things go south, you really don't want that person affecting you in a bad way. Greek heroes do exceptional things. That's really the big thing. They do exceptional things. Those do not have to be exceptionally good things. So the ancient Greeks likely would have viewed maybe a figure like Joseph Stalin or even Adolf Hitler as heroes, right? They were sort of exceptional people. They did exceptional things, but they did exceptionally bad things that really harmed their people and harmed a lot of other people as well. So we would not call those people heroes, but the Greeks would. And the point is, you always want to try to get the hero to help the community and not hurt it. The literary selection is some passages from Homer's Iliad. The theme of Homer's Iliad, the opening line of the poem, Main in aeda thea pelei dio akaleos, sing muse about the mainness, the rage of Achilles. Now, what's he angry about? And the word mainness is peculiar. It is not the general word for anger. The Greeks had like we do, we have more than one word for anger. This is a word that's closer to wrath or rage. This is divine anger, divine level anger. Other than of Achilles, it's generally used of the gods. So he is godlike, but he's also godlike in how pissed off he gets. Now, what's he upset about? What he's upset about is he's been insulted. What happens right prior to the Iliad itself, which is set in the 10th year of the Trojan War, is they've gone on a raid. They've attacked the city and they've taken hostages, and they divided up the loot. And so, different of the heroes have gotten different slave women or other stuff that they got. Agamemnon's prize is a slave woman who is the daughter of a priest. That priest is the priest of Apollo. Apollo's already on the Trojan side, and the priest comes with ransom for his daughter. Agamemnon refuses the offer, and he insults the priest. The priest then goes home and prays to Apollo, and Apollo, who already doesn't like the Greeks, now decides to cause plague to hit the Greek camp. To fix that problem, Agamemnon now has to give up the girl. He didn't get any ransom because he already refused that, and he has to basically take a hit for the team. By our standards, that's what he should have done, right? And even by the Greek standards, that's really what he should have done. He got himself into the mess. He should basically pay the penalty. Instead, he says, hey, it's not right for me who am the leader of the Greek forces, to be the one who doesn't have a prize. You guys all get a prize. I should have a prize. So one of you has to give me your prize. Well, that's not really fair. And Achilles says so. And then Agamemnon threatens to take Achilles' prize anyways, basically for standing up to him, which he does. Now, Achilles initially wants to kill Agamemnon, does not actually do that, but he says, I'm going to sit out the war and see how you guys do. And of course, things go bad. So here we've got the Achilles' great power, but now he refuses to help the Greeks, and that of course hurts the Greeks until of course he rejoins the battle after his friend Patroclus is killed by Hector. He then rejoins the battle. He kills as many Trojans as he can, and he wants to kill and does kill Hector. And the work as a whole ends with the ransom of Hector's body. So again, one of the questions that gets, one of the phrases that gets used a lot in the Iliad is the best of the Achaeans. And who is the best of the Achaeans? Ostensibly, it's Achilles, who is the greatest warrior, but he does a lot of harm. Agamemnon feels he's the best of the Achaeans because he has the largest empire and brings the most troops to Troy. Who really is the best of the Achaeans? The scholarship in chapter 10, this is new. This is in the first edition. It was totally different scholarship. This, I think, is a better selection. So there are two pieces here. One, a piece from Simone Weil, and the other from a woman named Sue Gran on the Iliad. And it's all about that Greek heroism, or just heroism as a concept, is tied to violence. So if you think of, for instance, of a figure like Dirty Harry in the Dirty Harry movies, especially the first one, but the first one and maybe the fourth one, ostensibly Harry's he's a member of the police force, so he's an authority figure, but he doesn't end up killing anyone who is not a villain, but that level of police looseness, as far as like their use of violence, would be very troubling if we were to see that every day. And of course, some people who are minorities sometimes do see that on the part of the police. So the police become this sort of mix that is, they may help, but they may also harm. And that, of course, ties into that Greek concept of the hero can help or the hero can harm. And but it's this idea of violence. In other words, there are other models that you could have for heroism, right? Someone who raises money for the poor and helps, Doctors Without Borders, for instance, right? They're saving lives. They're putting their own lives on the line to help people in need, but they're not using violence. That's a different sort of model. That's not really the Greek model, and for us, it's not really the model either. I mean, right? Action heroes tend to be violent heroes. The comparison section, which makes a lot of sense, comes from Virgil's poem, the Aeneid, which tells the story of Aeneas, who is one of the Trojan survivors. He travels to Italy to set up a settlement there. That settlement will eventually found Rome. I mean, the Trojan War is around 1150 BCE. Rome is founded around 750. There's a 400-year gap. So obviously he cannot found Rome, but it's tying Rome's founding with the Trojan War and with the Trojan survivors. And there's two selections here. One's from Book 7, where Alecto, who is a Fury, is sent by Juno, right, the Hera, Juno for the Romans, to stir up the Latins. Initially, the king Latinus has decided there's going to be peace between the Trojans and the Latins, and in fact, they will become one people. They'll intermarry. Latinus' daughter will marry Aeneas, and so forth, happily ever after. But Juno doesn't like that idea, so she gets Alecto, who's this fury, and is really described as sort of this gruesome monster, to go and stir up Amata, Latinus's wife, and Turnus, the leader, the chief military leader on the Latin side. And they both get fired up, like crazy fired up, that they just want to kill Trojans and so forth. So it's a wild sort of scene. A lot of that is tied to the Roman sense of what the Romans want is they want sort of peace. Now it's a Roman peace, right? They want a peace that's going to help Rome. They don't want, just any old peace, but they want, peace rather than war. They want Rome to be in charge, and they don't want there to be violent, revolutions and stuff like that. So this is sort of a Roman concept of order that we see in the poem. And it's tied also to Stoicism, which also argues that emotional turbulence causes troubles. So what you want to do is you want to keep an even keel. Think of the figure of Mr. Spock in the Star Trek world. He is basically, right, he's got his emotions in check. That's sort of what Stoicism preaches. And the worst thing that can happen is emotional volatility. And so Turnus, who gets fired up and he wants to kill Trojan, that's an example of emotional volatility. Aeneas, on the other hand, is trying to get to peace. Now, Aeneas can get violent, but for the most part, he is even-tempered. Now, we also have the very end of the poem, the last 80 lines of the poem, which deal with the death of Turnus. So Turnus and Aeneas meet one-on-one in battle. Aeneas wins. Turnus is wounded. He's on the ground, and he holds his hand up like a fallen gladiator, right? Like appealing to the victor, and in a sense, and appealing to the crowd. But the crowd can't really do anything here. And the norm and what would ordinarily happen would be for the Roman figure, Aeneas becomes sort of a Roman, even though he hasn't founded Rome. He becomes like a Roman ideal. And the Roman ideal is to spare the conquered, right? You fight hard, you win, but then you spare the conquered. You do not sort of push their faces down in the dirt, but you try to give them some sort of dignity, and they then become part of Rome. That isn't what happens here. Aeneas, in fact, initially wants to spare Turnus. He hears the appeal, and he sort of is willing to let Turnus go. And then he sees on Turnus's, over his armor, he's wearing the war belt of Pallas, a young man who was fighting on the side of the Trojans. He's a Greek from the area near where Rome will be founded, but he joins the Trojans, and he wants to learn how to be a warrior. Aeneas takes him under his belt, and Turnus had killed him in Book 10, and now when he sees that belt, Aeneas totally loses it, takes his sword, runs Turnus through, and Turnus' ghost goes screaming to the underworld. The end. There's no resolution. It ends on this moment of violence and cut to black. I mean, it is wild. And when we're thinking about ancient literature, it is like, what the hell? I mean, it is something totally different. So it's an amazing ending. It's a very peculiar ending, and what is going on there, because throughout, Juno has represented this emotional volatility, which is not a good thing. Aeneas has represented some sort of level of order, of keeping things in check. He does get angry on occasion, but he never sort of loses it. And then in the very last moment of the poem, he loses it. It's like, what are we to make of that? So it is sort of an impressive ending to the poem, if a peculiar one. And then the final thing, this is also new with this book. There were 3 poems in the first edition, 3 short poems that evoke Achilles, one from World War I, one from World War II, and one from the Troubles in Ireland, the Civil War in Northern Ireland. And those are all quite beautiful little poems. Here, Maurizio considers two modern works. David Malouf's work, Ransom, which retells the story of the ransom of Hector's body from Book 24 of the Iliad. And it sort of does a lot of background and a lot of other stuff going into that event. So it takes that one moment and sort of expands on it. The other work is Pat Barker's The Silence of the Girls, and this deals with the figure of Briseis. So Briseis is the slave woman that is Achilles' prize, the one that Agamemnon takes away. And this is sort of her view of the whole Trojan War and of Achilles. And there's a quote in there that says something like, swift-footed Achilles, great-hearted Achilles, divine Achilles, all the epithets just keep on piling up. We didn't use any of those terms. We just called him the Butcher. So that gives you an idea that, of course, unlike what we see in Homer, where Briseis actually seems to care for Achilles, here, no, she is a slave. She is a prisoner of war, and she does not care for her captor. So interesting take on those. In fact, I have to say I did not know of either of those works, but within the next year I will make sure that I have read both of them, because I'm impressed with works where they revisit stuff from the ancient world. Okay, so that will end chapter 10. Take some time with the Iliad and with the Aeneid stuff, especially. I think it's really great stuff. I'm a big fan of the Iliad. I mean, it's easily my favorite work in Greek, and the Aeneid has grown on me over the years more and more. In some ways, I consider the Aeneid maybe the greatest work to come out of the ancient world. That despite the fact that Virgil is sort of copying Greek stuff, it's still sort of an amazing work. And because of its complexity and because it's not 100% gung-ho, I mean, it's mainly gung-ho because it's a Roman work and the Romans are very gung-ho, there's still these underlying questions in the work that are I think make it really this impressive work to think about and to read. All right. See you next time.